You know, it's pretty sad that people will go for anything. And spiritually speaking, they would rather have their ears tickled, hear something emotional that makes, even if it makes no sense, rather than the truth expounded from God's word, the Bible. They'd rather um, have the foolishness. Satan got them so tied up, you know. The Bible even tells us that because people won't use their heads, their brains, to distinguish the truth from falsehood, God will give them over to their desires. The truth, even the simple elementary things, they won't understand. And like I said, people will go for the sad realities of what's been expounded upon from the pulpit rather than God's actual word of truth. I remember when I was a youngster, teenager, at the house with my mom and brothers and sisters, siblings. We used to go to church, and I remember coming out of church, and I hear two older women going across the parking lot saying, "Oh, Pastor so-and-so preached a good sermon." And I thought to myself, how could they say that when I couldn't even understand a word he was saying? He was moaning and groaning and shouting, and I couldn't understand a word he said. But they say he preached a good sermon because their souls were stirred. Has nothing to do with learning the truth. Hearing God's message of hope in these last days. Learning accurate knowledge about Christ and God, about the kingdom. That is what's going to save people. There's no such thing as people being saved right now. Saved is when you survive the end in a good standing before God. The end of this system at Armageddon, or the end of your life when you die in these days. That's, if you're in an approved station before God, that's when you're saved. Nobody is saved right now. But the Bible do tell us that because of people will go after those who will tickle their ears with that foolishness, and they are just bystanding Christians in the church. The Bible tells us that God will give them over to their desires. They won't even see simple Bible truth. They won't hear the ring of truth because of their hard-heartedness, and they just won't get it, as you see in these videos and the photos. One of the fruitages of God's Spirit is self-control. Yelling and shouting and jumping up and down, running around and all that. That's not one of the fruitages of God's Spirit. It's God's Spirit is not there. Maybe a demonic spirit. But I remember too. I remember when I first got married and left the house from my family. I went across the street to this church. You know, me and my wife at the time, we was gonna maybe join the church. And when I went, I stayed in this church for about 5 hours. And I was like, man, I got to get up out of here. But before I left, the pastor, they was getting emotional. The pastor got down off the pulpit, the stage, and started running around the church. Another lady got up out of her pew and started running behind him. So other people started, I'm like, what? I said, the first person walk out, I'm leaving right behind him. About 30 seconds later, someone got up and walked out, and I walked out right behind them. It's sad, though, you know. Accurate knowledge of God and His Son is what's going to save people. And applying that in these last days, that's what's going to save people. Not this stuff I've been talking about and what you see in these photos and these videos. If that is a part of your way of worship and your religious situation, perhaps you need to seek God's kingdom, seek His truth. Jesus said, those who seek will find. If you seek with a humble heart and be honest with yourself, you will find God's word tells us that Satan in the last days will blind the minds of the unbelievers so that the illumination of the glorious good news about the Christ might not shine through. And we see that today. I mean, those in Christendom don't see it. But those who know the truth see it. Billions have been blinded by Satan. The Bible tells us the blind leading the blind, and both will fall into the pit. Matthew 7:21. Jesus is talking to those who profess to be Christians. Those who saying to me, Lord, Lord, didn't I do this, didn't I do that, or what? I did whatever. It's not God's will for this time of the end. He's going to tell you, get away from me. I never knew you. You workers of lawlessness, iniquity, evil. Workers of things that fight against my Father's will. What God's will is for people today is to get His work done, and then He's going to wrap this system up. That's what God's will is for today. So, the Bible writer John, when Jesus brought him forth in the last days and showed him what would be going on, part of what John also saw was an angel yelling at the people in the churches. The angel said, get out of her, my people, if you do not want to share in her sins and receive part of her plagues. It's talking about false religion as a whole. Get out. God calls them my people because they are there thinking that they are worshiping God. But you got to worship and serve God acceptably according to His terms, His purpose, His will. So, all those photos and videos we just saw, that angel is shouting regarding that situation. When you see and you know that that ain't right, and you stay, you constituting yourself an enemy with God, what people need to do is heed the angel's message. Get out of her, my people. Babylon the Great, false religion, the world empire of false religion. That's in the Bible. She's a harlot, a prostitute. She's a woman. She represents all the churches of the world. And God's angel says, get out. Because in other scriptures in the Bible tells us her sins has masked clear up to heaven. And God has called her acts of injustice to mind. Very soon. John also saw an angel coming out of heaven with a big chain and put it around this harlot's neck. And on the other end of the chain is a big boulder. And the angel slings it into the ocean. And it goes all the way down and never to return. Never come up. Showing how swift her destruction is going to be. Soon, false religion the world over will crash and burn forever. What will you do when that happens? No one on this planet can save you, can help you. But God will be protecting His people. That event will kick off the Great Tribulation, where the Bible tells us that it'll be so bad no flesh would survive unless God cut it short. Heed the angel's message when he says, get out of her, my people, if you do not want to receive part of her plagues and share in her sins. Seek God's kingdom. Jesus said, if you seek with a humble heart, you will find the truth and get on to the road of life. Mm, mm, mm. Created in God's image. You got to be kidding me. Billions will die. The Bible tells us also that Satan transforms himself into an angel of light. And no wonder his ministers do the same thing. The blind leading the blind, both will fall into the pit. Satan is behind the curtains laughing. I've talked about a shock and awe campaign. Satan is running a shock and awe campaign, and it will be revealed in the end when there's no time left to do anything about it. That's why you must heed the angel's warning. Get out of Babylon the Great, the world empire, false religion, that harlot, that prostitute. Get out if you do not want to share in her sins and receive part of her plagues. Use that brain. We were created in God's image to distinguish this stuff. If we are humble, use our brain and be honest, open-minded, the truth will become so clear. Billions